Hello there, and welcome to today's recap of the Manhwa series titled Max Level Returner. In a nutshell, it's a story based on the implementation of the eternal gaming world into the real world. The main character is the player with the highest level and skills, and he tries his best to save the people of the world from the monsters. The game players have actually returned to the real world and are playing their part to save their country from havoc being created by monsters and demon lords. The monarch's duty is to level up his players and make them ready to fight against the high-ranking monsters that are yet to appear. The story starts with a fierce battle where the main character, Sang-Hyuk, successfully kills Demon King Baal, but he soon realizes that it was just an illusion created by the Demon King. Hyun shares his experience of his 22-year-long journey to reach this level, where he appointed 400 warriors to fight monsters. But unfortunately, they were killed 2 years ago, and he was compelled to fight against the Demon King alone. After fighting tirelessly for a long time, Hyun finally meets Demon King Baal and fights him throughout the night. Though he succeeds in knocking him down, he realizes that everything was just an illusion, and Demon King Baal is still alive. Demon King Baal is impressed by Hyun's performance, but the latter knows that he is not more powerful than the former. Hyun asks Demon King Baal to fight fairly, but his sword attack is easily dodged. Hyun, exhausted, asks Demon King Baal to kill him, but the latter disappears, and the Demon King's castle starts to crumble. Hyun is tired of chasing Demon King Baal and prays for death. As the Demon King's castle is destroyed, Hyun is rewarded for keeping the inventory, and he returns to the world where he belongs, in New York on December 31st, 2018. However, the world is not the same as before. People are missing, and natural disasters like tsunamis and earthquakes have changed the shape of the world. Monsters start to appear at night, attacking people. After 10 months, the monsters have already taken a tenth of the world's population, and the army is powerless against them. Hyun, also known as the Masked Monarch, fights against the monsters with his sword and defeats them. Even Demon King Baal appears and is impressed by Hyun's skills, but he knows that he needs to die in this hell. The observers are shocked to see the players fight so efficiently, even though their high-tech weapons are useless. According to Park Sang-jin, a geology professor at Beekson University, when players die in the eternal world, they return to the real world after 1 month, even though they may have spent a year in the game. These players return to the real world to help save it from the monsters that have been appearing and causing chaos since 2019. As players work to defeat the lowest level monsters, a high-level monster named Hugo, level 4, appears, causing concern for both players and the military commanders. However, in 2019, third-year players emerge and help defeat the low-level monsters. As the battle continues, even higher-level monsters like Smoke level 8, Veil level 10, and Sulker level 15 appear in the real world, making it increasingly difficult to defeat them. Fortunately, 6th-year and 8th-year players arrive to help fight these monsters, and the Masked Monarch, the 22nd and most powerful player, returns to the real world to fight Drain level 150. As of December 2020, the Masked Monarch has successfully defeated Demon King Baal for the 2nd time and kills monsters with his sword. The world has been destroyed by the monsters, and it is up to the players to fight and save it. In the following scene, the Masked Monarch goes to the house of Sang-min on level 63. He notices changes in the eternal world and hears that Masked Monarch and Sang-min are fighting a powerful opponent, Began, level 81, in Echoing Canyon in the 12th year. Sang-min is being held by the demon, and the Masked Monarch tries to save him but fails. Sang-min dies, and the Masked Monarch is left to face the monster alone. At present, Sang-min is happy to see the Masked Monarch and tells him about the 22nd player who defeated the Demon King Baal. Sang-min doesn't know that the Masked Monarch is the player who did it. Sang-min also tells him about the Korean Guild, but the Masked Monarch is not interested in joining them. Instead, he wants Sang-min to quit the guild. The Masked Monarch thinks about the Bo Hai Guild, whom he has killed, and who are using their power for evil purposes. The Masked Monarch has no choice but to kill them. He tells Sang-min that he is a pro-max player, and Sang-min is shocked to hear that his brother is the Masked Monarch. The Masked Monarch offers him Hamuri, which has an attack power of 450 to 800, and a Hamer's Rage of 450 to 800 to celebrate the moment. Sang-min is amazed to see the equipment brought by the Masked Monarch from the other world, which is not normally allowed in this world. The younger one is happy to see a rare sword, but disappointed to find out that his power level is only 118. The Masked Monarch comes up with a solution by giving Sang-min Lipa's ring 10, Sophia bracelet 10, and Sophia necklace 10, which will boost his strength and help him fight the monsters. Meanwhile, in Japan, a strange person updates a girl about the Masked Monarch's location in Korea through a crystal ball. Next, the Masked Monarch goes to the Yoon Sang-Hyuk office and officially reports his name to the player. He asks Sang-min about the types of equipment they are using to fight the monsters, since they cannot bring their equipment from the Eternal World. Sang-min tells him that the production classes, magicians, and conglomerates can make weapons, which are not as impressive as those in the Eternal World, but still usable. The Masked Monarch then wants to meet someone to inquire about the Dusk Workshop. Sang-min is skeptical if he knows him because Chol-woo, the owner of Dusk Workshop, is the most famous blacksmith, and people cherish him a lot. Sang-min himself wants a weapon from him. The Masked Monarch confidently enters the workshop despite the receptionist's reluctance to allow him in without an appointment. The Masked Monarch cleverly inquires about Chol-woo's location and runs to the specific place, with the receptionist following him and requesting him to stop. After reaching the workshop of Chol-woo, the Masked Monarch tells him to give him a reward to the receptionist for helping him find the place. The receptionist is surprised and grateful for the bonus. As soon as Chol-woo sees the Masked Monarch, he catches him by the neck, blaming him for losing his hammer in the Eternal World. Listening to this, Masked Monarch offers to let him join the 400 warriors and reclaim his hammer if he agrees to give Sang-min the weapon he wants, and reshape it to prevent anyone from recognizing him. Chol-woo immediately agrees to the request, and after this, the Masked Monarch hands over the hammer to him, along with items to boost Chol-woo's power level. Later, Chol-woo reveals to Sang-min that the Masked Monarch is capable of achieving the impossible, such as killing a dragon that others failed to eliminate. He also shares that Masked Monarch had previously given him precious steel to make a mask for him, which is now his most valuable work, and he's proud of it. Following this, Masked Monarch then inquires about the castle in Seoul and reveals that he wants to move from his current house. Chol-woo informs him that he also owns the castle of the Vampire Queen and suggests Lilith's castle as a new residence. Although the location is well guarded, Masked Monarch is confident in his abilities to deal with it. Sang-min is concerned about leaving their beloved house, but Masked Monarch assures him that it is also significant to him since their mother gave it to them. He also fears that monsters will attack once they learn his identity, so they must shift until the situation stabilizes. The Masked Monarch and Sang-min continue their mission to infiltrate a palace to retrieve a powerful stone. To get away from the guards, the Masked Monarch takes out an invisibility robe, and the duo uses it to sneak past the guards. Soon, they arrive at the tall barrier of the castle, and the Masked Monarch uses his special skill to lift Sang-min up in the air and land inside the castle premises. Next, the duo enters the castle and Sang-min feels something weird. The Masked Monarch suggests he avoid the strong smell and protects himself from being manipulated by the succubus, a female expert in seducing men and mind control. As they approach the palace, they admire the beautiful garden, but the Masked Monarch warns Sang-min of the danger of mind control by a fragrance that can absorb a human's essence, leaving only their skeleton behind. They knock on the door, and Lilith, the owner of the palace, greets them. They engage in battle, and the Masked Monarch realizes that Lilith is unbeatable and different from the succubus that inhabits the palace. Despite this, the Masked Monarch is determined to end the battle quickly and prevents Lilith from leaving. Along the way, Sang-min is almost seduced by a group of succubi, but the Masked Monarch scares them off. After defeating Lilith, the Masked Monarch intends to have a contract with her to complete their mission. The Masked Monarch is surprised to see how Lilith can behave like a brat, and he also encounters another succubus named Marion, who is of a higher rank. Marion tells them to leave by grabbing Sang-min, but he thinks that she should ask instead of giving orders. Using this opportunity, many succubi attack the Masked Monarch, but he dodges their attacks, rescues his brother, and tells him to go to the safest place. When Sang-min approaches, the succubus attacks him with fireballs, but they don't harm him. The Masked Monarch warns them not to attack him again, threatening to break their fingers. However, Marion cannot back down and attacks him with Butterfly Dash, which he nullifies and also catches Lilith. Now, the succubi have no choice but to listen to him. The scene shifts to a room where the Masked Monarch learns that Lilith does not understand the situation as she's only been here for 100 days, and she's not in her senses. Lilith also mentions that she has no idea how they ended up in the Nightmare Castle, as they only remember opening their eyes to find themselves there. When the Masked Monarch asks Marion if she belongs to the high tier, she replies that she doesn't know anything about it. The Masked Monarch then moves on to the main topic, which is signing a contract with Lilith. Marion warns Lilith not to sign it because she'll be his slave for the rest of her life. Listening to this, the Masked Monarch tells Marion not to interfere in their affairs, and she becomes scared and unable to speak further. He makes her understand that the castle needs a protector and that they need a new honor to make the place safe. He offers an option to Marion, indicating that they need her help to keep the castle secure. Later, after reading the contract properly, Lilith agrees to sign a contract with the Masked Monarch, which makes everyone in the castle his slave. However, he assures her that when she turns into her proper form, she will have the authority to tear the contract if she wishes. The Masked Monarch then orders everyone to change the nameplate of the castle, signifying his takeover. Meanwhile, Sun Knight Richard and Scythe of Judgment Harry Bertland are fighting monsters when they receive news of the Masked Monarch's arrival, which has created a lot of excitement in the area. The Ba Hail Hill Guild Choice Suck High, a level 102 player, has come to the Masked Monarch to seek his forgiveness and lead a righteous life. However, the Masked Monarch demands that they confess everything truthfully to the people the following morning before he forgives them. Outside the Nightmare Castle, player management director and a news anchor are trying to get inside at any cost. But Park Sang-jin warns him not to mess with the Masked Monarch. However, the director ignores the warning and bangs on the door, which is answered by Dream Dust, who takes him to an illusory world where he is dancing half naked. Right then, the Masked Monarch receives a call from an unknown number, which turns out to be Jay from the Eternal World's Dark Chamber, who wants something from him and offers him a considerable amount. Next, Chul-woo arrives at the Nightmare Castle with grandeur, and the Masked Monarch sends a succubus to grab him. When they meet, the Masked Monarch grabs him by the neck for causing another mess in the world. After things settle down, Chul-woo asks about the shift, and everything has been done, so he is ready to create weapons. The Masked Monarch agrees to open up a blacksmith shop, but mentions that it will take 1 month. He also gives Chul-woo 3 hearts of the Phoenix, which pleases Chul-woo greatly. Chul-woo then asks the Masked Monarch for another favor. He is in the war with Demon King Baal, and this time he has an extraordinary team of masked players who ask him to run away because he is their last hope. However, the Masked Monarch is not ready to leave them alone, and Demon King Baal is happy to see the loyalty of the vessel. During the fight, Demon King Baal throws the Masked Monarch away with his power, and blood comes out from his mouth. Butcher, another masked player, stops him from attacking the Masked Monarch, and attacks Demon King Baal with a laser, diverting his attention. Demon King Baal decides to handle the other masked players first, before confronting the Masked Monarch. Butcher asks Chul-woo to take the Masked Monarch away, and they decide to protect him since he can only fight back with him. When Masked Monarch comes back, everything has been eliminated, and his masked players have died to save his life. In the real world, Masked Monarch meets his masked players, Butcher, Vice Captain Guillotine, and Captain Iceflower, and they are waiting for him to proceed. The Masked Monarch asks them to gather all the players connected with him. The Masked Monarch's team of masked players includes Butcher, the level 165 captain, Vice Captain Guillotine, level 132, and Captain Iceflower, level 138. Chul-woo learns that they have gathered after hearing that the Masked Monarch has arrived. The Masked Monarch hands over 3 billion won to change the players' headquarters and gather all the players connected with him. In the next scene, Chul-woo and the Masked Monarch watch as the workshop progresses and is soon established. They decide to conquer the world and In the Italian Red Magic Tower Guild Crimson, which is at level 205, a stranger meets with a guild member. The stranger offers the rings that belong to her, but she's surprised to see them there. When she asks the Masked Monarch about this mystery, he doesn't have an answer. The stranger demands 200 billion won for the ring, which the guild member agrees to pay. The stranger informs her that her guess is correct, and she begins to wonder what the Masked Monarch is planning. The scene then changes to Gangwon-do-Gia, where a monster has destroyed everything. The Masked Monarch instructs his masked players to take on this task and win the hearts of the people, which will be the first step towards their success. Next, news reporters inform the public about a distressing situation in Gangwon-do-Gia, and mention that even the most powerful players have failed to overcome it. Meanwhile, the Masked Monarch sends his team, led by Butcher, to these places to defeat the monsters that are wreaking havoc. The media is puzzled about how they can defeat these monsters, but the Masked Monarch gives his team the necessary weapons to accomplish the mission. Afterward, the Masked Monarch and Lilith watch the news together and visit the Bradle underground graveyard, where priests pray to God. Here, the Masked Monarch explains to Lilith that if they violate the rules of this place, they become weaker and susceptible to getting attacked. While exploring the area, Lilith is attacked by a skeleton, but the Masked Monarch comes to her rescue and defeats the skeleton. The Masked Monarch then realizes that the Demon King Baal has significant influence in this area. After this, the Masked Monarch decides to take action and enters the gate to retrieve the rare sword of the Eternal World that he can use to kill the Demon King, Baal. As he enters, a boss-level skeleton with a power level of 200 attacks him. The Masked Monarch is excited to face this challenge and breaks the skeleton with his magic. However, the boss of the skeletons arrives, and it is the Pope who wants to know about the Masked Monarch. The Pope attacks him, but the Masked Monarch dodges the attack and creates many dog-like skeletons to knock down the Pope. However, the Pope is a tough competitor, and the skeletons created by the Masked Monarch are not strong enough to defeat him. At the same time, there appears Lord Masked, a player who uses a half-skeleton as a mask, to fight against the boss-level skeleton. Alone, he fails, but when Masked Monarch joins him in the battle, it becomes easier for him to defeat the high-level skeleton opponent. After defeating the opponent, Lord Masked asks the Monarch if he is going to the Echo Canyon. Here, the Masked Monarch denies the fact and requests Lord Masked to join his masked soldiers' team. At first, Lord Masked refuses to join, but when the Masked Monarch agrees to fulfill all his ambitions, he agrees. Meanwhile, we see a young girl arriving at an airport trying to find out some truth about the Masked Monarch. The girl goes straight to a cafe and meets Sang-min, introducing herself as Jay, the head of Darkness firm. She inquires about the Masked Monarch, and Sang-min replies that he is busy doing other work, but he's there on his behalf. When Jay requests to have a look at the ordered item, Sang-min hands her a box and reminds her of a favor that the Masked Monarch asked her to complete. Later, Jay states that she has already sent the invitations to all of the players from all around the world, and they have no choice but to come and visit Masked Monarch. Right then, the scene shifts to America, where the Absolute Guild Sun's Knight Richard Paulson is being questioned about his visit to Korea. Following him, Cathedral Knights Michael Buren from England, Nine Dragons Association's Chumo Roxioi from China, Emperor Guild Iem Galliop from Russia, Sword Ring Hasegawa Ryota from Japan, and Dragon Slayer Manuel Matthias from Germany are also preparing for their trip to Korea. In the next scene, when all of the guild members from around the world arrive in Korea, the public becomes curious about the plan of the Masked Monarch. Inside the Masked Monarch castle, Chul-woo is surprised to see all the warriors around the table. When the group is discussing the reason for which the Masked Monarch brought them there, the inviter arrives and gets into the real business. He pulls out the warhammer that Michael used in the other world and mentions that he wants to find out the owner of the weapons in the real world. Without wasting any time, the auction begins, and one by one the weapons are sold to the highest bidders. Because of the competitive bidding, Michael is compelled to buy back his weapon for $210 million, and Richard spends $200 million to get his son's sword back. Because Michael proposed $200 million for Richard's sword during the auction, the latter gets angry and attacks the former after the auction is over. The two engage in a fight and soon realize that their weapons are of no use to them in the real world. Meanwhile, the Masked Monarch is keeping an eye on them and smiling, thinking that his plan has succeeded and the players have fallen for the bait. Later, Richard visits the Masked Monarch and accuses him of giving the players false information about the weapons and selling it to them. However, the Masked Monarch replies that he didn't insist that the players buy the weapons, and also mentions that they should have checked the quality and features before buying them. Instead, he proposes to take care of the dungeons that America was facing problems holding on to. Soon, Richard exits the room and meets his fellow friends, and they deduce that they have been used by the Masked Monarch for his benefit. The scene then shifts to Odaesan, Gangwon-do, where Lord Masked is seen fighting monsters. Right then, the Masked Monarch appears behind him and offers help. Here, Masked asks Monarch why he requested the players to be on his side and made such a harsh request. In reply, the Masked Monarch replies that he does not want to waste time and complete his mission. Back to the normal world, the Masked Monarch gets a call from Jay, where she mentions him being a worldwide star. She also congratulates him for making their plans a reality. At McCraren International Airport, USA, the Masked Monarch arrives alongside Lord Masked and Lilith and meets Richard as planned. As the former promised to take care of the dungeons in America, Richard makes him aware that previously 5 other groups tried to complete the mission and failed. However, Richard is shocked to find only 3 people in the group fighting dungeons. Moments later, the group arrives at the battle place, the Great Labyrinth, and the public is really excited to see the Masked Monarch. The leader informs the others that the dungeon is very powerful and is considered to be undefeatable in the Eternal World. When the 3 are about to enter the labyrinth, the Absolute Guild's vice captain asks Richard if they are only this much in number and expresses his findings about the labyrinth. He also mentions that it is very difficult to find the actual entrance of the place, and many of the soldiers before failed because of this issue. Listening to his words, Richard only replies that if there is anyone who can subjugate the dungeons, then it is the Masked Monarch. The trio then moves forward into the labyrinth but fails to see anything around because of the dense fog. The Masked Monarch suggests everyone be attentive and look around as they can be attacked by monsters at any time. Lord Masked takes it lightly and soon gets lost in the fog. He nearly gets attacked by a monster, but the Masked Monarch saves him just in time. At the same time, Lilith asks for some ice cream, and the leader, Masked Monarch, promises to provide her with as much as she wants after they complete their mission. Next, the group starts lighting the lamps on their way to get a better view of the surroundings. Surprisingly, the leader asks Lord Masked to light only the 3rd, 4th, and 7th lamps. Lord Masked accepts the order and begins searching for the lamps. While moving forward to light the 4th lamp, he hears a loud noise, but the Masked Monarch suggests he focus on his given task and not get distracted. To his surprise, when he finishes lighting the designated lamps and turns around, he sees a huge pile of dead monsters and Lilith standing alongside the Masked Monarch. After Lord Masked finishes lighting the lamps, the fort moves aside, giving the group the view of the Great Labyrinth. Following this, they enter inside and the Masked Monarch makes the team members aware of traps. He then moves forward and stops in front of 2 doors, stating that they are allowed to choose, and if they fail to solve the maze, they will be sent back to the beginning. Later, the group chooses to go through 1, and as soon as they enter, a group of monsters attacks them. Lilith and Lord Masked fight courageously with the monsters, asking the Masked Monarch to take some rest. Masked Monarch also mentions that he brought Lilith inside the labyrinth to witness her powers and make her feel a little bit more responsible and mature. However, all of this is in vain when Lilith asks to get some ice cream after defeating the monsters. Next, the group moves forward and reaches the place where the red-eyed Shakiri is placed. The Masked Monarch also mentions that the boss of the labyrinth cannot be defeated by a single person, so they should work together. On the other hand, the public gets to know about the Masked Monarch getting ready to attack the red-eyed Shakiri and set themselves up to watch the live battle via a website. Moving on, the Masked Monarch walks up to the throne and breaks the red-eyed crystal to wake Shakiri up. After Shakiri wakes up, the two challenge each other and prepare for a face-off outside the castle. With the two getting ready for battle, the outside world people also sit in front of their mobile phones and laptops to witness it live. The battle begins, and after a couple of failed attempts, the Masked Monarch successfully manages to break the protective shield covering Shakiri's body. As it breaks, Shakiri transforms into a centaur and becomes more powerful. He starts trying different tactics to bring the Masked Monarch down. However, to his bad luck, the Masked Monarch is well aware of his every move and battles with precision. Eventually, Monarch successfully distracts Shakiri and using this opportunity beheads him using his longsword. Everyone watching the battle is stunned by such a move of the Masked Monarch and appreciates him. Richard is also impressed, but he wonders why the match is being broadcast live. Right then, he receives a message about the underwater kingdom, which has begun to appear. Richard also remembers the Masked Monarch asking all of them to get stronger and face different opponents on their own, as he cannot be present everywhere. Back to the normal world, Sang-min shows the Masked Monarch an image of a hybrid monster. The latter is shocked to see this in the real world, since it's a fusion of a monster and a human created by an evil player, Edward Gonzalez. After he sees the picture, he gets worried and talks to different authorities to search for Edward and subdue him as soon as possible. Later, the Masked Monarch meets Jay for the same thing and inquires if she had any information about Edward. Jay replies that she saw a hybrid monster recently in Japan, implying that Edward might be there. Without wasting any time, the Masked Monarch asks her to call Hasegawa Ryota from the Sword Ring Guild in Japan. During the call, the Masked Monarch informs Ryota about Edward being present there and suggests they meet. Masked Monarch then prepares to leave for Japan and mentions that he has other things to do while he's there. In the next scene, we see the Masked Monarch in Tokyo standing in front of a beautiful tattoo artist, Kurihara. She is also the one from the Eternal World, having the ability to impart different special skills and strengths to the players with the help of her designs. The special thing about her is that she uses the monster's blood to make tattoos. The Masked Monarch then proposes Kurihara join his group, but she kindly refuses. However, she later agrees when the monarch promises to provide her with the blood of the Demon King, Baal. Meanwhile, hybrid monsters start appearing all over Japan, and Ryota can be seen attacking and fighting them with his sword. Edward, on the other hand, is watching him kill the monsters from the top of a building. The following day, the Masked Monarch goes on to meet Ryota and asks him if he's managed to locate the hybridizer. When Ryota replies that he and his team are trying to find him, he is belittled by the Masked Monarch and is given the ultimatum of 3 days to place the hybridizer in front of him. The monarch also gives a hint that if he fails to do so, Ryota will receive a very harsh punishment. Later, Ryota visits a ceremony and meets a senior dietitian, congratulating him on the promotion. However, to everyone's surprise, the dietitian turns out to be the one who is actually experimenting with hybridization. Ryota informs him about the Masked Monarch arriving in Japan, but this news does not affect the dietitian. He simply asks Ryota to eliminate the monarch and guard the emperor's building. The scene then fast forwards 3 days, where the henchmen of Ryota's group are guarding his place against the Masked Monarch. To their dismay, Ryota receives a call from a private number at the same time, and a huge tower emerges in front of them, with monsters coming right at them. After this, the whole city turns into chaos, and monsters begin appearing from every corner. It is actually a fake overflow that the Masked Monarch has created to threaten Ryota and his group to give him the location of the hybridizer. However, instead of doing so, Ryota calls the dietitian, Yasuhito, and informs him about the situation. To his dismay, the dietitian tells him to let the innocent public die, indicating that the monarch will receive harsher punishment because of it. The reply from the dietitian enrages Ryota, and he decides to defend the citizens of his country himself. While he's fighting the monsters, he receives a call from the Masked Monarch, where he's again asked about the location of the hybridizer. This time, he gives in and provides the monarch with the location. As soon as he says so, the monsters stop attacking the public and return back. Here, it is revealed that Lilith can put the monsters to sleep using her powers, and Kurihara can trigger the fake overflow of dungeon monsters. Later at night, the Masked Monarch, alongside Kurihara, arrives at the location of the real hybridizer, Edward Gonzalez. The Masked Monarch tries to stop him from hybridizing humans and creating these deadly creatures, but Edward believes that he's creating art and refuses to stop. When the Monarch threatens to kill him, he takes out a revolver and shoots himself in the head, not before stating that he has left someone behind to look after his business. The next day in the news, it is mentioned that the famous dietitian Yasuhito has died and that he committed suicide. It turns out that the dietitian was actually Edward in disguise. The news also mentions about this overflow that occurred in Japan, but with no casualties. On the other hand, the Masked Monarch returns to Korea and meets with Jay. He tells her about what Gonzalez told him before killing himself and wonders who the other person might be. Then he asks her to investigate and find the person at any cost. Moreover, the Masked Monarch also asks her to provide him with the location of the alchemist of lunacy. The scene then shifts to Hong Kong, where a drug dealer is trying to sell drugs to a young man. The dealer lies to the young man, stating that the drug is actually made from the monster's corpse and that it can increase his strength and power. Right then, there arrives the Masked Monarch, who proposes to buy some drugs. As soon as the dealer sees him, he believes he's a police officer and starts running away. However, he cannot outrun the Monarch and gets caught. At first, he takes him as a police officer, but when the other puts on the mask, he immediately recognizes him as the Masked Monarch. The Monarch also calls the dealer by his name, the Alchemist of Lunacy. Elsewhere, a new island emerges in the middle of the ocean, surprising the Navy pilots and everybody else around. They are wondering about how an island can move on its own. Afterwards, the Masked Monarch takes the alchemist to his place and asks him to make more than 200 potions in a day to increase the player's strength and agility. He also promises to provide the alchemist with all the services he needs and let him live a luxurious life. Right then, when the two arrive at the airport, Sang-min receives them and the Masked Monarch introduces him to the alchemist, Michael. After the introduction, Sang-min informs his brother about the island that has recently emerged in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Hearing this, the Masked Monarch states that the island is called the Mystery Island, and it is a giant dungeon. It's a place where players can battle with the monsters and earn points. Every high-level player from around the world has come to the event and is enjoying their time there. We can see Kowloon Society, Luo Jioi, also observing the game. It is also mentioned that Luo holds the record for the competition, i.e. 23 rounds. Meanwhile, Richard appears on the battleground to face the monsters and earn some points. He believes that he can become stronger than before and can easily surpass the Masked Monarch's level 29. Using his son's sword, he fights bravely and surpasses 28 levels, surprising everyone. But to his dismay, when he reaches level 29, there appears one of the 13 cathedral knights of Resilia, Adello, the Holy Executioner. Adello is the one whom the Masked Monarch failed to defeat in his last attempt. The battle begins and Richard tries his hand to land a harsh blow on Adello, but fails several times. Adello's body armor turns out to be the reason for his failure. In the middle of the fight, all of a sudden, Richard feels unconscious and falls to the floor. Everyone in the audience is unknown about what happened to him in the first place. As Richard is being carried out from the battleground, there appears the Masked Monarch, ready for his turn to battle against the monsters. The crowd immediately erupts and cheers for the Masked Monarch. Fulfilling everyone's expectations, the Masked Monarch completes the lower levels with ease and advances to break his previous record. On the other hand, Sang-min is roaming around Mystery Island with Miss Ayane, trying to impress her. He asks her to accompany him in watching the Mystery Island's main event together, and surprisingly, Ayane agrees to his request. Later, Richard gains back his consciousness and is wondering about how he suddenly lost consciousness and lost the match. Right then, he hears a loud noise coming from outside, and when he approaches the balcony, notices that the Monarch has already defeated Adello and completed level 29. Richard is shocked to know that the Masked Monarch has broken his previous record and is now advancing to the final round of the competition. Without any delay, the final round begins and the Masked Monarch begins fighting his opponent. This time, he uses a rare technique called the Blood Awakening and manages to give a harsh blow to his opponent. He uses the technique in full force and successfully defeats the monster, clearing the final level and winning the competition. After he wins, he's taken to the treasure room and asked to choose any item he wants. As soon as the Masked Monarch looks at the options, he chooses the Limit Breaker potion as his winning gift. He then drinks the potion and goes past the maximum level and reaches the personal level, 301. The scene shifts to Russia, where a painting explodes, surprising the mage painter, Andriy. Right then, the painter receives an international call. Following this, in Germany, Chul-Wo gets caught by a lady mage engineer, Dina, while trying to steal something from her inventory. Back in Seoul, everyone gathers at the Masked Monarch's castle and discusses the reappearance of Demon King Ball. The group is then approached by Chul-Wo, who informs them that if the Demon King Ball reappears, then it will be difficult for the Masked Monarch to face him alone. So he requests everyone to be on the Masked Monarch's side and help him defeat the opponent. In the middle of the conversation, Andriy asks about Kurihara and suggests that he can exchange knowledge with her, and with their combined power can produce something more effective and unique. Chul-Wo likes the proposal, and he immediately agrees to talk to Kurihara. Meanwhile, the Masked Monarch can be seen at Crater Castle, fighting monsters with the help of Lilith. Soon, the two meet the 72nd Demon Lord Asmodeus, and the Masked Monarch gifts Lilith a rare item, Asmodeus's divinity, which will help her to increase her attraction level and the special effects she possesses. Lilith becomes very happy after receiving this gift, and now she's ready to fight some more monsters. After some time, the duo reaches the end of the castle where the statues of 72 demon lords are present. The Masked Monarch states that the lords are those soldiers who sold their souls to the demons. Here, they meet the high priest, Taluna, the owner of this castle. The Masked Monarch fights against him and beheads the priest in no time. He then picks up Taluna's divinity crown and gives it to Lilith. Later, after their mission is over, the Masked Monarch suggests returning back to the castle and continuing their work. He's surprised when Lilith helps him in reaching the castle faster than he could have imagined. Seems like he's unaware of Lilith's full power. With a blink of an eye, the Masked Monarch and Lilith arrive inside the Monarch Castle. Shocked, he asks Lilith about how she did it. In reply, she tells him that the castle is her source of power and she can teleport there anytime she wants. Here, she also reveals that as she's a succubus, she can make anyone sleep and invade their dreams. When the Masked Monarch seems confused, Lilith asks him to wait and brings Richard in front of him. She then reveals that she just visited the man's dream and brought him there. Seeing this, the Masked Monarch wonders if he too can visit other people's dreams with her. Lilith is also ready to try it, and before the Masked Monarch leaves, he asks Richard to keep this a secret from everyone if he wants his guild members to get back their weapons. The scene then shifts to China, where a group of players has defeated the dungeons of the unbeatable Tower of Abel. Just then, a news reporter announces that China has become the #1 in the world for completing unbeatable dungeons and is planning to complete the remaining dungeons by the end of the year. At the same time, the Chinese Player Management Bureau head, Zhang, can be seen holding a potion, supposedly able to revive dying people. His assistant tells him they have indeed tested it successfully on cancer patients and got positive results. Moreover, he mentions that they have already received huge orders from great countries like the USA, worth $960 billion in total. Zhang becomes very happy to hear this, but refuses to provide the potion to their own players. On the other hand, Chul-Wo gets angry after listening to the news and wonders why the government is not taking any steps to look after the players. Kurihara adds that the Chinese government is doing so because the majority of the Eternal World players are from China, and they believe that they can easily expand their numbers. The next day, the Masked Monarch inquires Lilith if she still remembers the lady they met sometime before with black hair and black eyes. After Lilith confirms remembering her, he then asks her to take him into her dreams. Soon we see Luo feeling tired and falling asleep. Right then, she notices the Masked Monarch standing behind her. Without wasting his time, the Masked Monarch asks her about the recent events in China and if they are being carried out under Kowloon Society's assistance. In reply, Luo mentions that a group named Superhuman Exhibition is managing all of the Chinese players. and that it existed before she returned from the eternal world. She also clears that Kowloon society is already under influence of the group and is working under them. Luo seems worried about the fact that their society will soon crumble because of their lack of unity among their 9 leaders, carrying 9 different opinions. Hearing this, the Masked Monarch gets enraged and decides to teach the leaders a lesson. In the next scene, when Zhang is in a meeting with his subordinates, commanding them to threaten the Kowloon society members to subjugate a high-ranking dungeon, the Masked Monarch arrives and attacks the group. He knocks them down and also releases a group of monsters to eliminate them and stop them from causing more trouble. Meanwhile, in northern China, an overflow of monsters occurs, and the citizens are suggested to remain inside their designated safe houses. Luo can be seen fighting against the monsters along with her society's vice president, Lu Haran. Haran motivates his group and encourages them to fight the monsters bravely. After a few days, a news channel displays a report about the Chinese government appointing a new head to the superhuman exhibition. Surprisingly, the new leader of this group is none other than Luo Jioi. The Masked Monarch also watches the news and is happy to see the change. He then continues roaming around the Chinese market, trying to find out about the weapons being sold there. Next, Chulwo, Kurihara, and Andri are discussing different ways to mix their magic together to create a powerful weapon. After giving it a thought for some time, they come up with a potion powerful enough to resurrect the dead, a revival potion. When the Masked Monarch calls them for a meeting, Chulwo presents the potion in front of their leader. The monarch is surprised to see his group working so hard and producing new items every day. When Andri tells him that the ingredients required to make the revival potion is huge and that they can only create a little quantity with the current supply. As soon as the Masked Monarch hears this, he promises to gather all the ingredients by himself and help them as much as he can. Following this, other members also present their innovations, making the monarch happy and satisfied. The leader then leaves to make a deal with other nations' players and supply them with their newly found weapons. The scene shifts to Siberia, where a group of players is ready to subjugate the Castle of Confusion. While the castle is still the same after 20 years, no one has ever succeeded in subjugating it. There is also a rumor that whichever group will succeed in subjugating the castle will get anything they demand or want. Over the years, many groups have tried and failed in their attempts. The next morning, the Masked Monarch visits someone and inquires him about the Castle of Chaos. The guy seems to be a brat and asks the monarch to return him his weapon before expecting information. In reply, the Masked Monarch promises to provide him with ways to conquer the Emperor Guild. Next, the Masked Monarch is at the Baylosk airport where he is approached by an Eternal World player, Anton. Anton is surprised to see the Masked Monarch calling him by his name. Here, we're shown a flashback about how the Masked Monarch saved Alina, Anton's fiancée, from the monsters and provided her with a new life. Anton is very happy to see the Masked Monarch and expresses his feelings of gratitude. In the meantime, when Anton mentions about expecting a child with Alina, the leader congratulates him and also gives him a gift. The event is reported to the guy the Masked Monarch met before, and he is happy to learn about the progress. Following this, Anton takes him to a forest and provides him with the roots to reach the Castle of Chaos. The Masked Monarch then sets off alone toward the castle, using his special powers to locate it in the fog. Soon, he succeeds in locating the castle, and without wasting any time, starts shooting arrows at the gargoyles who are guarding the place. After defeating the gargoyles, the Masked Monarch heads inside the castle. He tries to destroy the door blocking his way, but surprisingly, his powers don't work. He then realizes that he needs to solve a puzzle to get inside. Looking at the 72 Demon Lord statues placed there, he starts figuring out the puzzle and the ways to solve it. The Masked Monarch walks around the castle and observes the statues placed there. After not finding a single clue, he decides to destroy all of the statues present there. At this time, he notices a strange statue that he has never seen before. Then, the Masked Monarch starts counting the statues and realizes that there are 73 statues, not 72. After this, he quickly deduces that the solving point of the puzzle is to eliminate the odd one. Right then, one of the fake monster statues comes to life and prepares to attack the Masked Monarch. However, the monarch quickly gets into position and fights against the monster. After a while, he manages to defeat the monster, destroying a red pearl implanted in its chest. The moment he defeats the monster, the door in front opens. Suddenly, a red hand appears from inside and pulls the masked monster, surprising him. After this, the Masked Monarch wakes up inside the Demon King's castle and finds Lilith sitting next to him. He wonders how she got there and urges her to not follow him without permission. However, Lilith does not listen to him and starts exploring the castle. While the two are talking, suddenly a monster appears from behind and tries to attack Lilith. Luckily, the masked monster responds in time, asks Lilith to dodge the attack, and saves her life. He then begins fighting the monster and kills it with ease. Upon looking closely, he finds that the monster is a level 72 demon soldier, but is weak. He assumes the place is a replica of the Demon King's castle and takes a close look around. Right then, he discovers a chest of confusion, from where a player can get a random item. Having other things to do, he puts the chest into his inventory and hears a rumbling sound from behind him. Next, when the Masked Monarch turns back, he notices another demon monster of level 71 running towards them. One by one, the monsters from the lower level start appearing, and the Masked Monarch defeats them using his extraordinary skills and experience. After defeating all the demon soldiers, he receives a gift and an advancement in his agility and strength. The fight increases his intelligence by 15 levels and his dexterity by 10. Following this, the Masked Monarch and Lilith continue their way into the castle and finally meet the rank 1 Demon King, Baal. As soon as King Baal sees them, he tells the Masked Monarch that it is not the place where humans are supposed to be. At first, the Masked Monarch refuses his statement and replies that he is there to conquer the castle. Later, he also prepares to attack him. Importantly, the Masked Monarch believes that the Demon King he is facing is a fake one and is determined to eliminate him. The two battle, with both of them unleashing their special moves. The Masked Monarch is, however, surprised to see the Demon King Baal missing his shots from a very short distance. He also mentions that Demon King Baal does not have patterns of attack and he should learn it during the fight, using his experience and time. Suddenly, in the middle of the fight, when the monarch addresses the Demon King as fake, Baal leaves the fight and rushes towards Lilith. Seeing this, the Masked Monarch suggests Lilith run away, with him pursuing the Demon King. Unfortunately, the Demon King succeeds in injuring Lilith and runs away. The monarch puts her on his lap and asks her to consume the revival potion. However, before he can do so, a monster appears out of nowhere and breaks the glass bottle of the potion. In no time, the duo gets surrounded by a group of monsters, with the Demon King Baal leading them from behind. When the monsters start approaching for the attack, the monarch puts Lilith aside and takes out his sword. He slashes his sword through a couple of monsters, successfully beheading them. To his surprise, when another group of monsters is about to attack, there appear pink bubbles in the air, distracting the monsters. Everyone is surprised to see the bubbles, and when the Masked Monarch turns around to look for Lilith, he finds her standing upright, with newly grown horns on her head. He's shocked to see her in such an appearance. Moreover, Lilith asks him if she's gotten prettier and if he likes her new look. At the same time, seeing all of his monsters falling for Lilith's nightmare trick, Demon King Baal gets stressed and tries to run away. However, his attempt fails when Lilith catches up to him and threatens to reveal his real identity. At first, the demon continues to introduce himself as the Demon King Baal, but when Lilith unleashes her newly found power and attacks him, his outer appearance fades away. Here, it's finally revealed that he is a fake Demon King and is just the king of the Castle of Chaos. The masked monster is, however, excited to see the gifts that he will obtain after defeating the demon. To their bad luck, they only receive a chaos chest with some jewelry inside. Before they leave, Lilith wants to talk to her master about their subordinate contract. The Masked Monarch again reminds her that she can end the contract at any time, but cannot rejoin after. After this, Lilith gives it a thought and tells him that she believes the safest place for her to stay is beside her master, and she wants to keep working for him. She also mentions that she wishes to live a normal life free from any stress and full safety. Lastly, she requests her master to let her call him Oppa, and the Masked Monarch surprisingly accepts her proposal. After they reach outside, they talk to the members of the Emperor Guild and inform them that they have successfully subjugated the Castle of Chaos. In the next scene, Lilith appears in Sang-min's dream and invites him to attend a meeting with other masked players. They gather around the Chaos chest that Lilith has brought and discuss if the Emperor Guild members will be angry at them for using the chest. Here, we're shown a flashback where the Monarch talks to the Emperor Guild members and informs them about the ways to enter the Castle of Chaos and collect the chest. However, he also belittles them for their low-level intelligence and warns them that with their current status, they will fail to even open the gate. Later, while returning from the place, the Masked Monarch talks to Anton and asks him why their boss, Ian, is wearing the ring that belongs to his wife. He then makes Anton remind the importance of family and suggests he take his ring back. In the next scene, Anton confronts Ian and mentions that he wants to leave the guild and also wants his ring back. Listening to this, Ian gets enraged and asks him to go away. When Anton starts disclosing his deeds, Ian gives him a solid punch and threatens to kill him. Just when Ian is about to hit Anton with a knife, the Masked Monarch arrives there and stops him from doing so. He scolds Ian for his behavior and also removes him from the position of chairman of the Emperor Guild. Surprisingly, he announces that Anton will be the next chairman of the guild, and if anyone opposes his decision, the whole guild will be eliminated. The guild members have no choice other than to accept Anton as their new chairman. Back at the Monarch's castle, the player administrative bureau director Lee Hyung-suk arrives to meet the Masked Monarch and talks to him about the government proposal. He mentions that the parliament wants to let him use the land in front of the castle and return work for them in specific areas. Listening to this, the Masked Monarch seems a little bit worried, since he doesn't want the non-players and politicians to make rules about how they attack dungeons. As Lee Hyung was also a player in the past, he proposes to make the Player Administrative Bureau a private organization, and Lee, the director. Lee agrees to his offer and promises to work for the welfare and betterment of the players and never let him down. Following this, the Masked Monarch visits the parliament and meets President Yang Min-ho. Here, they talk about making the country of Korea a better place for its citizens. When the Masked Monarch mentions that he's there to inform them not to seek permission, one of the representatives of a party gets enraged and starts shouting at him. To his bad luck, the monarch tells him to remain silent since he has no idea about the eternal world and how much the players work to earn their worth. Eventually, the Masked Monarch asks the president to disband their Player Administrative Bureau, surprising him all of a sudden. When the president asks him about helping the country, the Masked Monarch replies that he will only do so if he accepts his proposal to let their bureau work privately. On the other hand, Luo is in Los Angeles, wondering about the inactive behavior of the masked mercenaries after they completed their attack in the Castle of Chaos. She believes that they might have found the Chest of Chaos. Meanwhile, at Mount Jiri, while a researcher is looking for some rare medicinal herbs, he finds a strange-looking mountain range in the middle of a forest. Next, Chul Wo and other masked mercenary group players visit the Masked Monarch and ask him about the deal he made with the president. The leader replies that there is nothing serious and he just has to be at places where the government wants him. Right then, Lord Mast suggests that they too need to head out and fight monsters to increase their levels. He also mentions that because of their current low levels, they are not able to focus fully on creating specific and effective items. Eventually, he asks the Masked Monarch to provide them with a succubus or an incubus for backup. The leader takes their request as genuine and provides them with the assistance they require. At the Bureau of Players, one of the employees shows a picture of Mount Jiri and mentions the appearance of a new dungeon, a steel mountain range. A senior employee explains to him the importance of the mountain range and why it's a jackpot of high-ranking weapons in the eternal world. He also believes that with the appearance of such places, the monsters will also level up and it will be difficult to fight against them. Soon, guild members from different places arrive in South Korea and begin asking for permission to explore the Steel Mountain Range. Compelled, The secretary has no other option than to contact the Masked Monarch and let him handle the situation in the Steel Mountain Range. In the end, the Masked Monarch receives the letter from the president asking him to govern the place. The Masked Monarch is well aware of the Steel Mountain Range as it requires a group of 5 players to enter the place, and they must be ready to fight against the monsters wearing armor stronger than metals. The guild members from all around the world meet the Masked Monarch and request him to let them explore the mountain range. However, the monarch suggests that they need to have higher experience levels and skills to go to the mountain. Right then, Michael Buren from England accuses the Masked Monarch of trying to take sole ownership of the mountain range. These words from Michael make the leader enraged, and he announces that he will not allow a player from England to visit the place. In the next scene, the Masked Monarch reaches the Steel Mountain Range with the different guild members and his group. Soon there appears the Black Knight, ready to attack them. The Masked Monarch then takes out the hammer and attacks the knight with full power. Surprisingly, he asks other group members to get out of his way and let him fight alone with the knight. He then uses a technique called flash steps and eliminates the Black Knight. After the fight, he tells his team members that not only do they require high-level skills but also strength to fight against the monsters at Steel Range. Afterward, the Masked Monarch leaves the other team members to fight against the remaining knights while he moves forward to explore the place. At first, Richard tries his best to land a solid blow on the knight, but fails. The knight instead throws him away. Seeing this, another guild member deduces to attack the knight all at once after Richard successfully distracts the knight. Unfortunately, the knight takes out his weapon and starts throwing it around the players, killing the majority in the process. With this, the group decides to change its formation and launch another group attack. Surprisingly, when they do so, Richard and other guild members manage to land their powerful attack and defeat the knight at last. After the fight, Richard and the group gather and realize that they were able to defeat the knight only because of the potions and weapons that the masked monster gave them before. They also accept that they are currently at low levels and should increase their levels to be able to fight against the monsters one-on-one. Meanwhile, we see the masked monster, the Masked Monarch, on top of a steel range, holding a giant Titan's ring in his hands. He believes that rare items like the ring maintain the excitement to work hard for the gifts and treasures. He also carries a longsword for the first time and decides to take it as a gift for Chul Wu. Sometime later, the Masked Monarch returns to Richard and the group and asks them about how many knights they managed to capture. Richard replies that he faced a hard time capturing a single one. To their surprise, the monarch tells them that he successfully captured 8 knights, including a red knight. He also accepts their proposal to let them raid the mountains once a month for treasures and armor. In the news reporter announces the Masked Monarch's return to the palace and also mentions that he's going to auction the Dark Knight's corpse at the new building of the Players Association. On the other hand, the Masked Monarch visits the president of the association and gifts him 2 boxes, one filled with money and the other one filled with a rare necklace. The president at first refuses to accept the gifts, but later, when the monarch mentions that it will help him stay away from the bribe proposed by other organizations, he accepts them. However, after the president, Lee Hyung-suk, leaves, the Masked Monarch asks Lilith to keep an eye on him. The scene flashes back to the past, and we get to know that the Masked Monarch and Sang-min's parents died while going to attend a class reunion. Afterward, they were approached by an old man and asked to live together with them. However, one day when the old man's wife called the brothers' duo a burden and only aims at getting the insurance money, the elder brother hears it and leaves the house with his brother. At present, the Masked Monarch and Sang-min again visit the old man and request him to sell them the mountain in which he buried his parents. Despite the mountain having a market value of 500 million won, the Masked Monarch offers 2 billion won to the old man for the mountain. Hearing such a huge amount of money, the old man asks the brother if they are also the players who fight monsters. Right then, there arrives the old man's son, Sang-ho, who claims to be a player and a member of the Goguryeo Guild. He also mentions that one should pay 500 million won to be a member. The monarch is shocked to hear this and reveals to Sang-ho that he is an 8th-year player and not a beginner. Before leaving, the Masked Monarch again asks the old man if he's willing to sell the mountain or not. This time he offers him 10 billion won. Hearing the amount of money offered, despite the old man hesitating to sell, his wife immediately calls their family cemetery mountain useless and urges him to sell it. The family soon agrees to sell it and also calls a lawyer to settle the purchase. Moments later, after purchasing the land from the old man, the Masked Monarch calls him greedy and selfish. When Sang-Ho tries to defend his father, the Masked Monarch speaks with the Goguryeo guild head and immediately removes him from their members list. At first, Sang-Ho does not believe in all this, but later when he gets a message, he's bound to accept the consequences. To add to the family's dismay, the Masked Monarch also asks them to remove all the graves from the mountain he just purchased. He also threatens to punish them if they do not empty the mountain within the given time. On their way back to Monarch Castle, Sang-min asks his elder brother why he gave a lot of money to the old man for the mountain. In reply, the monarch tells him that he wants to keep his parents safe from any trouble and also wishes to build a lavishing garden for them. Meanwhile, in Italy, a group of players defeat monsters and discover a gold coin on the ground. They believe that the coin is left there by a fairy and decide to drop it in a nearby well to get rewards and gifts. To their dismay, even after dropping the coin into the well, they get no response for a while. Suddenly, a flash appears from within the well and a huge monster emerges out of it. Next, the Players Association Bureau is handed over to President Lee Hyung-suk by the Masked Monarch, and he believes that he'll take good care of it. Right then, an employee responsible for building the Monarch Castle approaches the Masked Monarch and informs him that the seller, Meteor Group, in front of the castle is not willing to sell the land, despite them providing him with as much money as he wants. While the two are talking, the representative of the Meteor Group calls the Masked Monarch and agrees to hand over the land to him. He only puts forward a condition that the monarch should help his master, Park Ho-sung, gain back his personality. Later, the Masked Monarch talks to Park Ho-sung, and he claims to be an 18th-year player at level 187. The former is surprised to hear this and inquires about his guild. However, Park denies being a member of any guild and mentions that he spent most of his time in the Flame Tower, built by the natives of the Eternal World. Hearing this, the Masked Monarch asks Park to be with the Masked Mercenaries group for the time being. Moving on, later in the day, the monarch meets Jae and asks her if she wants to sell some land. She denies doing so and diverts the topic toward the Chest of Chaos. As soon as the conversation begins, the monarch gets enraged and walks away from there. Following this, we are introduced to Lee Jae-sung, a guy who reached the highest level using his luck stat. Jae suggests the monarch use Lee Jae-sung's skill to increase his luck and then open the Chest of Chaos. The monarch also agrees to her request and calls Jae-sung to his office. He then inquires with him about his magical dice skills and his accuracy rate. Sadly, after knowing that it took him 27 days to hit a jackpot in the casino, the Masked Monarch gets enraged and yells at Jae. On the other hand, in Russia, in the Castle of Chaos, while the masked mercenaries are fighting the monsters, the players nearly get killed. Luckily, Park arrives there in time and saves them, using his power. Meanwhile, the Lord of the Deceased performs a ceremony and awakens the undead warriors from underneath the earth. He praises himself after he successfully brings out the skeleton monsters from slumber, and mentions that it is what he learned from the Masked Monarch. The scene then shifts to the Steel Mountain Range where the Balhae group is fighting the monsters. The Masked Monarch and one of his subordinates are watching over the battle from atop. The subordinate praises the Balhae group and also inquires about Park. He wonders how one can do wonders with his magic using a 4th-tier magic spell. On the other hand, there is an overflow from the Incheon Industrial Center, nearly killing around 100 innocent people. In the meantime, the Masked Monarch is fighting the White Knight on a mountain, using his special technique called Aura Blade. He successfully defeats the knight, in the hope to get a legendary item drop. To his luck, after the knight gets defeated, he leaves behind a golem's heart and considers it a jackpot. However, when he turns on his mobile phone later, he gets to know about the overflow and believes that someone is trying to defame him as he governs the Steel Mountain Range. As the monarch brings the golem's heart and hands it over to Chol-woo and the group, they keep on looking at the beauty and discuss ways to use it. Right then, Chol-woo suggests that they can even use the heart to create a golem itself. Moving on, the Masked Monarch sits in a meeting with the president of the Players Bureau. The president informs him that the overflow might have been triggered by the members of the Phoenix Guild, which has control over the industrial center. The president also provides the monarch with a photograph of a strange person captured outside the industrial center just before the overflow occurred. As soon as Lord Masked sees the picture, he recognizes the person as Ahmed Hassan, the master of the Tower of the Dead in Egypt. Hearing this, the Masked Monarch decides to leave for Egypt and teach Ahmed a lesson for his deeds. He leaves not before giving duties to Sang-min and his subordinate, Baek-jung, to clean the mess in the industrial center. Following this, the Masked Monarch arrives in Egypt alongside Lord Masked and Park. Lord Masked wants to know more about Park, but the monarch denies him from providing any more information. Masked also promises to fight against Ahmed and defeat him. To their surprise, Ahmed is at the airport gate to receive them. Soon, the group arrives at Ahmed's residence, and without wasting any time, Ahmed tells the Masked Monarch that he is not involved in the overflow that occurred in South Korea. Even after the monarch shows him the picture, Ahmed denies being the one. Enraged, the Masked Monarch draws out his sword, threatening to kill Ahmed if he continues to lie. Witnessing such rage from the Masked Monarch, Ahmed becomes afraid and accepts that he did everything under the influence of Michael Buren. He also reveals that he received mana from Buren to carry out the experiment from Michael. At the same time, one of Ahmed's subordinates tells him that an overflow has occurred in the tomb of an unknown king. Listening to this, the Masked Monarch asks him to take care of the condition and handle it the best he can. Next, we see them on the battlefield, fighting against the skeleton monsters. After Ahmed agrees to follow in the Masked Monarch's footsteps, he decides to help his group fight against the undead king monsters. Without wasting any time, Lord Masked summons his undead army and begins his attack, surprising Ahmed. On the other hand, the Masked Monarch also hands a magical wand to Park and requests him to accept it. He also says that the wand can increase his magical powers exponentially. At first, Park refuses to accept it, but when the monarch tells him that it's a welcome gift for him to their masked group, he accepts it. As soon as he gets it, begins performing 2 different spells, a lightning spell and a fire spell. Lord Masked and others are watching Park in shock, admiring his magical skills. In no time, the whole army is defeated, and Ahmed agrees to be a sub-guild to the Masked Mercenaries. Later, the group, along with the Masked Monarch, enters the highest floor of the tomb and confronts the remaining army of undead. Before beginning the attack, the monarch suggests everyone act quickly to kill the monsters. He also tells his team members about how fast the unknown king can respawn if they consume more time, and that he'll be attacking them after his army's health drops below 50%. The group then quickly resumes the attack with Lord Masked unleashing his skeleton army. Later, when the unknown king uses his mind control technique on Lord Masked, the Masked Monarch sends Park to his rescue. Park just approaches the unknown king and tries to land a blow on him. However, he fails to injure or even make an impact on the king. Seeing this, the Masked Monarch comes to his rescue and defeats the unknown king with a blow. The scene shifts to the next morning, where Park sees a dream about his childhood where he is rejected from being friends because of his high-status family. Park felt very sad about it and had to spend his childhood alone. At the same time, the monarch arrives there, waking him up, and asks him about his bad dream. After hearing Park out, the Masked Monarch proposes to be his big brother and listen to all his problems and conditions. He too opens up to Park and tells him about the hardships he faced in his life. It turns out that Park hid his identity in the eternal world and wanted to live in the world as a normal human. Later, when the Masked Monarch and his team are about to return to Korea, Ahmed approaches them and apologizes to the leader for his mistakes. However, the monarch does not accept his apology and informs him that he needs to visit South Korea soon. Moreover, when Lord Masked expresses his desire to compete against Ahmed, the latter simply accepts his defeat and declares Lord Masked as the Necromaster. Meanwhile, in Japan, the master of Phoenix Guild, Park Tae-sung, can be seen enjoying his time in the pool when someone from behind informs him that their work at Incheon is almost completed. The unknown figure also mentions that the monarch will never be able to locate their hiding place. Back at his castle, the Masked Monarch asks his group members to do some research on the Phoenix Guild and Michael Buren. He assigns the task to Aya and suggests she complete it soon. Right then, Lee Jae-sung comes running to the leader and suggests they open the chest of chaos. The Masked Monarch also agrees to it and lets him open the chest. Fortunately, he finds a golem constructing blueprint inside. He becomes very happy to get it and announces a huge reward of 10 billion won to Jae-sung. The scene shifts to the United Kingdom, where a huge golem tortoise appears on the beach, scaring people away. Back in Korea, the Masked Monarch reveals to Sang-min that he is building the city for the betterment and prosperity of its citizens. Moreover, he also states that he will create a separate garden at their parents' grave and decorate it. Here, the elder brother remembers his friend from childhood, Kim Jul-jung. Hearing this, Sang-min says they should contact Kim and visit him. Sometime later, when the Masked Monarch is peeping through the door of Kim's house, Kim surprisingly appears from behind and confronts him for his act. Together, the two jam very well and enter a tavern to have a drink. Then they talk about the old days and how they used to back each other up. At this time, the monarch notices Kim's worn-out shoes and decides to give him some new ones. In response, Kim shows his friend the picture of his beautiful daughter and mentions that he is still alive for her. After a while, Kim is completely drunk and the Masked Monarch carries him home. At home, he gets to know that Kim is worried about his mother who is hospitalized, and the fees. As soon as the Masked Monarch hears this, he proposes to help his friend, and requests Kim's wife to not tell anything to him. The following morning, when Kim wakes up, his wife, Mrs. Jae-soo, makes him apologize for drinking alcohol and urges him to get ready as they have to visit somewhere special. Kim has no idea about where they're going and just follows his wife and daughter. Soon, they arrive near the monarch's castle and a person arrives there searching for Kim. While Kim is surprised to see this, Jae-soo asks him to keep his mouth shut and follow the man. After walking a bit of distance, the family arrives inside a lavish house, with the Masked Monarch waiting for them inside. Kim is shocked to see him there and asks him what they're doing there. To his surprise, Monarch asks Jae-soo to start moving into the place and use it as their own. Before talking to Kim, he also asks her to take their daughter outside in the garden and play with her. Just when Jae-soo steps out, Kim yells at his friend for showing pity for his condition and gifting him such an expensive house. At first, he denies to accept it, but when the Masked Monarch tells him that he is the only friend he can count upon and will do whatever he can to make him happy. Listening to this, Kim starts crying and wondering about how he's going to pay for all this. To make the situation easy, Monarch tells Kim that he will now be working for him and his starting salary will be 100 million won. The scene then shifts to Japan, where Park Tae-sung confronts Kurihara and asks her to follow his orders. Later, at Park Tae-sung's place, the Masked Monarch also arrives and despises the one who worked for a little bit of mana and ruined a number of the general public's life. At first, the monarch accuses Tae-sung of following Michael Buren's request, but soon the latter refuses to do so and clears that he didn't do any harm to people. Hearing this, the Masked Monarch gets surprised and asks about who can leak the secret information about the overflow to Michael. Tae-sung replies that his guild member, Junichi, is the one who did so. He also apologizes for hiding the information for such a long time as he was afraid of facing him. Meanwhile, in England, Crown Prince James holds an emergency meeting and talks about the moving castle that appeared in Edinburgh a few days ago. Here, we can see Michael Buren explaining the moving castle as a dangerous monster to the prince. He mentions that no one is able to get control over the huge monster, and if they do not change its path, they will have to face a huge loss. However, when the Prime Minister and Prince asks him who can control the monster, he accidentally mentions the Masked Monarch and states that only he has the ability to change the direction of the moving monster, Tartarus. The next morning, while enjoying food made by Lilith, the Masked Monarch watches the news and gets to know about Tartarus's appearance in England. He then meets Jay and talks to her about the same matter. Jay informs him that England is desperately looking for his help to make Tartarus change its direction. Sometime later, Michael Buren himself arrives in Korea and meets the Masked Monarch. Alongside him, other government officials also visit the castle and make arrangements for the monarch to talk to the Prime Minister of England. Surprisingly, the monarch makes a deal with the prime minister asking for a 50% stake in the mana ores. After making the deal, the monarch and Jay immediately head to England and begin implementing different ways to change the direction of Tartarus. The Masked Monarch also mentions that, though he failed in the previous attempt, he will give his best this time and complete the task. Next, we see the Masked Monarch trying hard and unleashing his moves to change the direction of the Tartarus towards the given direction. After struggling for a bit of time, he only manages to shift the direction by only 12 degrees. The Prime Minister and other officials start getting worried and ask Michael if the Masked Monarch can actually change the direction. In reply, Michael tells them that as long as the leader does not give up, they are sure to succeed. Following this, the Masked Monarch increases the intensity of the attack with the Lightning Spear and the Aura Blade spells, and successfully changes the direction as he wanted. Afterward, the Masked Monarch flies up into the air and takes a look at the castle trapped on the Tartarus's back. As he failed to enter the castle before, he wishes to visit it alone and lands in the Tartarus. Without hesitating a bit, he opens the door of the castle and faces a lot of enemies hidden inside. He then summons Lilith and asks her if she's able to teleport to longer distances. Lilith confirms the fact and agrees to teleport anyone to that destination. Later, the Masked Monarch watches the Tartarus getting submerged into the ocean with the castle on its back. However, during the expedition, the Masked Monarch has increased its level and has also obtained different valuable treasures. Despite this, he wants to explore the abyss and gather more experience points and upgrade his level. As soon as the Tartarus submerges into the ocean, the Masked Monarch enters the castle and is fighting against the knights. He also asks Lilith to bring his subordinate, Butcher, to the palace and requests him to appoint other two masked mercenaries to guard the place. Butcher immediately agrees to it, and because of their loyal behavior, the monarch gives them one of the most luxurious facility departments. Even after getting all the things he wanted, the Masked Monarch does not get satisfied and keeps on coming back after months in the Tartarus castle and collecting some treasures. In the next scene, we get to know that Chul-Woo and his group have successfully completed the production of a golem, and the only task remaining is to impart a soul into it. The monarch requests his team members to volunteer, but no one agrees to do so. After several refusals, Chul-Woo agrees to be a soul partner for the golem, stating that he rarely goes hunting. Without wasting any time, Chul-Woo cuts through his palm and drops a couple of droplets of blood onto the golem, asking it to come to life. Luckily, the golem emits a bright light and comes to life. Following this, Monarch again visits the abyss and begins fighting the knights. To his dismay, this time the knight seems strong and powerful. The Masked Monarch then starts worrying about how to defeat the knight. For another round, the Masked Monarch carries a shield to fight against the knight. He spends time learning its moves and the ways the knight uses its sword. Later, the Masked Monarch successfully blocks most of the attacks and, using an opportunity, lands a harsh blow to eliminate his opponent. Finally, his level increases and he also gets several other benefits. In the next scene, the world quest begins and the event is supposed to last for 3 days. There occurs a sudden announcement, and the majority of the people are chosen to be the players. They are also informed that a portion of their XP they will earn during the event will be donated to the person who granted them the opportunity to take part in the event. On the other hand, the Masked Monarch arrives at his castle and meets with his group members. Chul-Woo immediately approaches him and informs him about the finished golem and praises its strength and effectiveness. He also mentions that 3 golems are under construction. Hearing this, the Masked Monarch suggests making frontline soldiers out of the golems and asks Butcher and another trusted soldier to be a soul giver to the golem. After this, he also asks Butcher to find the most trustful players from the Balhae Guild and bring them to the Masked Monarch. Moving on, when the Masked Monarch is looking through his stats, Chul-Jung knocks on the door and comes inside. He then informs the monarch about him and his family awakening as the players. Listening to this, the Masked Monarch suggests he keep calm and mentions that his family is very lucky. He also asks Chul-Jung to work as a blacksmith. Before Chul-Jung leaves, he is provided with a gold necklace for his daughter as a gift. He also mentions that Chul-Jung can now earn a lot of money after joining the Masked Mercenaries group. While the two are talking, Sang-min comes rushing to the room and informs him that someone from the masked mercenaries group has killed a human. On looking at the CCTV camera footage, one can clearly see that the player who killed a human is wearing a mask and their group's uniform. Butcher believes that someone is trying to carry out a prank on them. At first, the Masked Monarch suggests visiting the police stations and inquiring with the officers present there. Later, Park comes to visit the Monarch and offers to volunteer about finding out the real culprit. After this, Park arrives at the town all alone and uses the magic wand to search for the criminal. Luckily, in a short period of time, Park gets the location of the culprit and informs the Monarch and the Players Association about it. The association looks into a database and discovers that the player is none other than a 37-year-old Taegyun Kang. As soon as they get information about the player, the Masked Monarch asks Butcher to capture Kang and bring him to the office as he wants to know why he killed a human. In the next scene, while Kang is partying with his friends in a club and spending a huge amount of money, Butcher and his group arrive there and subdue him. Next, he is brought in front of the Masked Monarch and asked why he killed a human. Afraid, Kang reveals that he was just asked by a person from the religious association to wear a masked mercenary's dress and kill a human for 1 billion won. The monarch is shocked to hear this and urges his men to inquire about the truth. Later, the Masked Monarch meets Jae and gets to know that whatever Kang told him before was all true. She also tells him that because of the implementation of the eternal world, the religious association was actually losing its members from all over the world. Listening to this, the Masked Monarch asks Butcher to invite all the priests from the eternal world. In the last scene, the monarch sits in a meeting with the priests and urges them to establish a church of every god in the real world, and also assures them that he will be funding the development. The chapter ends with the monarch assisting Park to increase his levels in the castle of Abyss and suggesting he implement all of his skills into increasing his wisdom levels. After this, he takes Park to the higher floor to experience and fight the real dungeons.